If you have a Bible, you could turn there. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 is where we're going to be at for the most part today. And we're in part 3 of a series that we began a few weeks ago called Summer of Love. And already we've talked about intimacy and sex, so we're off to a great start. And week 3 is hopefully going to be no different. Today we're going to talk about singleness and dating. Singleness and dating. Now, this is not going to be an exhaustive and comprehensive overview of this topic because it is much bigger than we can tackle in just one weekend, and we will probably talk even more about it next weekend, but we're going to at least get started today. And before we get into this, just a disclaimer, I am not a dating coach. In case that you thought that I was, I am not a psychologist, and I'm not going to even really get into like which app should I use and which app should I not use and where should I go to meet someone, where should I not go to meet someone, even though all those things are very helpful to discuss. I'm not a psychologist, but I am a pastor. And what I hope to give to you today are some biblical principles and then to let you work out the application of those principles. And if you have a notebook, I would encourage you to take notes today, or if you want to jot them down in your phone, because not everything that I say is going to be on the screens, and you might want to remember some of this stuff. Now, before we begin talking about dating, I maybe want to surprise you. I was going to say shock you, but that was like too intense of a word. I want to surprise you by just starting off here, okay? First off, our first and highest priority is not to find a spouse. Our first and our highest priority is not to find a spouse. That might seem like an interesting way to begin a message on dating. Although dating and finding a spouse is important, it is not the most important thing. And so before we get into dating, let's talk for a moment about singleness. Because before you're with someone, you're with you. And you better figure out how to deal with you. See, we make the mistake oftentimes of thinking that getting into a relationship is going to fulfill us. But what I have discovered and what many have found out over time is that that does not solve your problems. It actually magnifies them. Because when you get into a relationship with someone else, now you're taking all of the baggage that you're carrying and combining it with the baggage that another person is carrying. And in a way, it actually enhances some of the struggles that you might have instead of solving them. I've seen content single people and discontent single people. I've seen content married people and discontent married people. And so I believe there's actually a deeper issue even at play here. Paul says this in 1 Corinthians 7. I wish we had time to go over this whole chapter today because it is so helpful when it talks about marriage and singleness. But I just want to read a few verses. I was actually just going to read verse 38, but I'm going to read starting in verse 36. I don't know if all these verses will come up on the screen. This is Paul's like kind of summary of this entire chapter where he's been talking about singleness and marriage and remarriage and widowhood, all these things. He says, if anyone thinks that he is not behaving properly towards his betrothed, if his passions are strong, and it has to be, let him do as he wishes, let them marry, it is no sin. But whoever is firmly established in his heart, being under no necessity, but having his desire under control, and has determined this in his heart to keep her as his betrothed, he will do well. So then, he who marries his betrothed does well, and he who refrains from marriage will do even better. What? That doesn't sound like a lot of what we hear about marriage, right? A wife is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if her husband dies, she is free to be married to whom she wishes, only in the Lord. Yet my judgment is that she is happier if she remains as she is. And I think that I too have the Spirit of God. I'm going to start closing whatever I say like that. And I think I too have the Spirit of God. So, this runs, at least seemingly, contrary to a lot of what we hear about marriage, even within the church. So what is Paul getting at here? Because it seems kind of interesting. In the last chapter, which we talked about last week, Paul elevates and upgrades our view of sex, and he kind of enhances it and tells us what it should be and the beauty that it's supposed to contain and the gloriousness of it. And then he gets to the next chapter and he says, as amazing as that is, you don't need it. It's not necessary to live a full and complete life. Because obviously when Paul says you don't have to get married and that you can do better if you don't get married, he understands that sex is reserved for marriage, right? So he's implying that you can do even without sex. But he's very realistic at the same time, and he understands that that is a major passion for most of us in this room. And so he says, if you're burning with passion, it's better for you to get married than it is to remain single. But there is an assumption within a lot of circles that singleness implies that you are incomplete. Singleness implies that you're missing something. One is the loneliest number that you'll ever do. If you could have seen JR's face when I started singing, it was amazing. I will never forget that. It's a faulty assumption. Christianity is the first faith system ever to elevate singleness. Our founder was single. Hello? And it also says that singleness is a valid and a meaningful way to live. Now, this was a countercultural idea in Paul's time, and it's still revolutionary in our time, but especially in Paul's time, the world in which he lived, your marital status was everything. There was no such thing in the Roman society as individual honor, success, or achievement. It was only based on your family, familial honor, success, and achievement. And so without family, you essentially had no significance in life. In ancient society, what Paul was saying really would have run contrary to what most people thought. In fact, if you were a widow in the Roman Empire, I think it was 2 years. If you had not been remarried within 2 years, you would start to be fined by Caesar. And so Paul is saying here, you don't even have to be remarried if you've been widowed, which we just read. So there's that view, which is like the family is the only way to have significance in life. But then there's another view in Western secular society that we might be more familiar with, which doesn't necessarily place as much value on that, even though I think there's still an extreme value on family in our society. Less than there's ever been, but still it's very predominant. But we live in a world that basically says all that matters is here and now. All that matters is the moment in time in which we are living. And once you die, you're gone. And if something were to happen and all of humanity was destroyed tomorrow, no one would remember us forever. Therefore, the biggest place to find meaning in life is in romance. And so we place this high value on finding your person. And we place an extremely high value on this picture that we have of romantic love as if it is everything, and that our destiny will never be actualized until we find the one. And so we live in this assumption that we are going to find this person who's going to complete us. And let me just tell you this morning that in Christ, we understand that both of those ideas are not true. Both of those ideas are not true. Paul is saying it's okay if you're single. It's okay if you don't have a family. It doesn't change your value or your worth, and it doesn't mean that you have to live some kind of lesser life. And here's our first point this morning. We need to be united with Christ. United with Christ. Paul is saying if you are united with Christ, that you have found life's ultimate purpose and that you are not lacking anything. If you have found a relationship with Jesus, then you have found life's greatest meaning. I've heard it said that if your relationships are off horizontally, there's usually something off vertically. Because our relationship with God impacts and influences every other relationship in our life. So the most important thing is not finding a spouse, it's being united with Christ. That's why Paul says in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31 and 32, he's talking about marriage, and he says in verse 31, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh." And then he says this mystery is profound, and I am saying that it refers to Christ and the church. So the Christian understanding of marriage and of singleness is that our ultimate purpose is found in a relationship with Christ, and that we aren't missing anything because marriage on earth, as good as it might be, is only a picture to show us what the greatest relationship is supposed to be, which is our relationship with Jesus. And so if you have the ultimate relationship, but you miss that one here on earth, you're not missing the most important thing. And Paul is also saying that you don't even need, it's not necessary to have a family, because in Christ you are connected to other believers through the church, and this becomes your family. Now, this is something that might, again, rub us the wrong way, especially with how much emphasis certain people and culture place on these things. But it's important for us to understand, because if we try to get into a relationship thinking that that is going to fulfill us, we are going to place unnecessary expectations and burdens on the person that we're with that they can never fulfill. And so you'll find this constant frustration in your marriage relationship thinking you were supposed to be the one that fulfilled me. And then when they mess up and make mistakes, which they will, you're going to be so disappointed and frustrated. And so the most important thing is that you are united with Christ. Now, let me also say this as a caveat, because I think that some of us hear a message maybe that emphasizes singleness and we're like, oh, cool. And we're just like, I'm just going to hit cruise control on relationships, and I'm never actually going to get into one because I'm good. Even though you want one, but you're like, I'm just going to kind of be lazy about it. I don't know. Like, I don't know exactly what it is that leads to that. But a fulfilled single life is not an excuse for selfishness. A fulfilled single life is meant to still be lived in community where you are giving of yourself sacrificially to others. And so you're never going to find fulfillment if you're like, well, cool, I'm good. If your singleness is just an excuse for selfishness, you're going to find that there is something in your life that is missing as well. And then in the world, obviously this is what Paul was getting at, but some people are like, oh, cool, I'll be single forever and I'll just never get married, even though I'll continue to sleep with this person that I'm dating. And of course, Paul's saying that's not how this works. Right. Like, Paul's saying, again, we talked about it last week, I won't get into it in great detail, but sex is supposed to be done inside of a covenant called marriage. And sexuality isn't even just like about personal fulfillment, it's also about sacrificially giving yourself to someone else. And so if you're giving yourself completely to someone else, you should have this safeguard called marriage surrounding that. And so Paul is not saying it's okay to just, we're seeing the marriage age continue to move up in America. It's not because people aren't getting married, it's because, or that they're not having sex, it's just because they're like, oh cool, I can have sex without the commitment. So that's not what we're getting at either, right? So you need to be united with Christ. Secondly, after you're united with Christ, then you may end up being united with a spouse. The two shall become one flesh, as we just read a moment ago. Now, here's a caveat. Dating is not mentioned in the Bible. The reason dating is not mentioned in the Bible is because much of the Bible, the way that relationships were conducted, was prearranged. And now that I'm a dad, I think maybe we should go back to that. I'd be okay with having a little bit more of a say in who London marries. Jack can marry whoever he wants. So there's not a lot of parameters and instructions specifically about dating in Scripture, but there are principles that we can apply to dating. And the first principle is just this, that you should do it with intentionality. You should do it with intentionality. It's not just to have fun. It's not to mess around. Your ultimate goal in dating is to see if you can discover a spouse. The end goal of dating is to find someone to marry. So dating should be done with intentionality and purpose. And if the end goal of dating is marriage, that informs how you go about it. And there are certain things, if dating's supposed to end in marriage ultimately, that are non-starters if you're a follower of Jesus. Because if the end goal is marriage, and the Bible is very clear that Christians should marry Christians, that we shouldn't marry people outside of the faith, if that's the end goal, then that means you have chopped off a certain portion of the population that is eligible for you to date. Because if the end goal is marriage, then we can't be dating somebody who doesn't have the same value system and belief system as us. 2 Corinthians 6:14 says it very clearly, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. It's talking about marriage. It was funny when I was typing that out, I actually made a mistake and it said, don't be unequally toked, which you should also not do. So I was going to get into this more next week, but I'll at least give an introductory to it this week. This is where you may want to take some notes. There's a book that C.S. Lewis wrote called The Four Loves. And there's 4 different Greek words for love. In English, we just use one, love. And so there's no differentiation in English between I love ice cream and I love my wife. It's the same word, right? But in Greek, there's different words for love. And I think this might be a good system to use for discovering who you might want to marry. Okay? Let's go through these 4 words of love. The first is agape. Agape love. Agape love is unconditional love. It's actually godly love. And God is really the only person who has complete 100% agape love. And so if you're thinking about that in terms of dating, we just started off with making sure that you want to be with a Christian. You want to make sure that you're united with someone who understands at least what that agape love is. So you want to have that. Another word for love is the word eros. Eros. This is the word for romantic love or sexual love. This is the word that would encompass the things that we're talking about right now. So it's totally warranted and good that you would be physically attracted to the person that you're dating and that you want to marry. Now, the problem is when that's the only criteria. The only criteria is they got to be hot. That should be in the list. That should be in the list, but it doesn't need to be the only thing, right? Well, they're hot. Well, so is hell, right? Woo! All right. And there's nothing wrong with being physically attracted. In fact, if you're trying to save sex for marriage, the person you're dating, it should be a challenge, right? If you're oh, no problem at all. Well, something may be wrong there. It should be a challenge. Now, Song of Solomon is a book all about romantic and sexual love, and we can dive into that at another day. It's honestly, I was gonna say it's PG-13, but it might even be closer to R. It's a pretty descriptive book. There's some traditions in which Hebrew boys were not allowed to read Song of Solomon until their bar mitzvah when they turned 13. It's a little bit too hot, but all throughout the book, the man and the woman keep going back and forth talking about how much they're attracted to each other. In Song of Solomon 4:7, this is one of the instances. It says, "You are altogether beautiful, my love. There is no flaw in you." And so there should be this like infatuation and romance and physical attraction that should be a part of this dating relationship and potential marriage for the future. So that's eros. Thirdly is the word philia. Philia. Now this is friendship. The word Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love, it has its roots in philia. Philia is like a friendship kind of a love. And I would submit to you that this is the most undervalued component of a long-term relationship, is friendship. At the end of the day, the person that you're with, I think this might be the most important thing long-term. That you're just friends. That you like to hang out with each other. That you can have a conversation with one another. That you can go to the grocery store together. Like you can do the most mundane, normal things together, and it just makes it so much better that you're doing it with this person. My old pastor used to say, like, marriage is great. He's like, it's like a sleepover with your best friend for the rest of your life, you know? And Song of Solomon also talks about this in chapter 5, verse 16. It says, "This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem." You should be friends with the person that you're interested in. And if you're just like, you've been dating for 3 weeks and you're like, I literally don't have anything else to talk about with you. Like, let's just make out. Like warning sign, right? And then number 4, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes the baby and the baby carriage. Storge is the last. Storge is family. It's familial love. It's the love you have with your siblings. It's the love that you have within your family. And eventually that's what will happen if this is the person that you end up marrying. I would say just a couple more things briefly. I would say one thing that you want to look for in marriage is you want to have synchronicity. Doesn't mean you need to have everything in common with the person that you're getting together with. But it's helpful if you're like kind of heading in a similar direction. Obviously, we're not talking about relationship with Jesus. That's a prerequisite. That's, again, a non-starter if that's not in place. But like, if you find somebody who's like passionate about the same thing that you are, who's really eager to move in the same direction as you, that's just going to make marriage a lot easier. It doesn't mean you can't make it work if you aren't doing that. You still can. But if you're kind of like, you see life through a similar lens, you have like similar feelings about where you're heading and what you want to do, it's just going to help you in the long term. So, let's say that you're dating this person, things are going well. What should you do? Well, I said you need to be intentional with dating, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be fun. I think Christians sometimes place, because of the things I'm talking about, they place such high pressure on dating. And I can see this happen in church sometimes. If this has ever happened to you, I'm so sorry. But you'll start dating someone. Within like 1 or 2 weeks, people are like, are you getting married? I am so sorry if that's ever happened to you. Like, it takes time, right? Like dating, it's okay to like take the pressure off a little bit. You don't need to know within the first few dates if this is your forever companion. Like you can go and you can have coffee and you can go do something fun and you can hang out and you don't need to place all of this pressure on it. It can take its time to come together. In fact, Song of Solomon 8:4, it says this, "I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases." Now, this is talking about sex, right? Like, you need to wait, you need to take your time before you heat up your relationship to that degree. But you can also say, take your time in the relationship. Like, if the goal of marriage is forever, you don't have to rush that. Right. You're going to have forever. I know so many people who, like, they start dating and then they're like, let's get married, like immediately. And I always caution against that. Like, take your time. You shouldn't take forever. That's the other side of it, right? It's like, well, we've been dating for 6 years. And like, it's like, well, you should know by now, like, you need to like move forward at some point, but you don't have to rush it. And let me just encourage you, you are going to still have to wait, even when you're married. Like, you're going to have to put the same principle of patience into practice. In fact, maybe even more so after you're married. And so if you're with somebody who can't wait now, what makes you think they're going to be able to wait later? Like, if you're with somebody who's rushing you into marriage, rushing you into sex, like, that doesn't bode well for the future of your relationship. So if you're united with Christ and then you're united with your spouse, the two, as the scripture says that we read earlier, the two become one flesh. And when you get married, you start becoming one. Of course, sexuality is a part of that. But also over time, your lives start to blend together. I heard a pastor talking about his marriage with his wife of like around 40 years or so, and he said when someone would ask him a question about his opinion on something, immediately he would know how he would answer and how his wife would answer. Because they were so connected on a deep level that they almost like thought the same. And he could choose in that moment to answer how he would answer or how she would answer. You see, over time, in a way, you lose yourself and you blend together with this other person. And the two become one flesh. It doesn't mean that you don't like the things that you like and that you're not two different individual people, but you start to just come closer and closer together over time. One of the words for united, or one of the definitions for united, means to live in harmony. Harmony. Like, I think about the worship this morning or any Sunday, like someone might be singing the melody, someone else might be singing the harmony, and there's different keys, right? They're all singing the same song, but they're singing it in a way that complements and enhances the vocals. And when you're in marriage and you're united, you're not the same person, but you start to blend together in a way that enhances the overall volume of your life. It enhances the beauty of your life. You start to complement each other and you live in harmony together. So, let me just, as we start to wrap things up, let me just take some of the pressure off too when it comes to marriage, because we place so much pressure on finding like just the right person. Can I just tell you this morning, there's a good chance that all of us are going to marry the wrong person. What do I mean by that? Like, you're never going to find the 100% right person because you're flawed and the other person is flawed. And when you come into marriage understanding you aren't meant to be the all in all for my life, you can come with an expectation. This is what Paul's getting at. The person who's married has his attentions divided because he's thinking not just about how to please the Lord, but also how to please his spouse. Like, Paul is very realistic about marriage. He doesn't just paint it in these like flowery colors where there's no problems and hardships and challenges. I'll just tell you right now, it's hard to be married. It's hard work that over time, it just is going to require you to give of yourself in a way that maybe you didn't even know you needed to give of yourself. Like, imagine two things getting put into a blender to become one thing. It's painful, right? Parts of you are going to have to die. And so don't go into marriage thinking this is going to be everything for me. It's going to fulfill every desire I've ever had. Honestly, you need to go into marriage thinking about serving the other person and dying to yourself. And when you know this and you know that the person that you're with is going to morph and change over time. I heard this. Someone said, my wife has lived with at least 5 different men since we were married, and all the 5 were me. So you're not necessarily looking for a finished sculpture, but a great block of marble. The last thing I'm going to say, and maybe Rachel can come and help close this out. I really felt like this wasn't really what I had planned to talk about today, but I really felt led to go in this direction and close with this. So we're united with Christ, we're united with our spouse, and we're united with each other. Again, the verse says in Ephesians that the picture of marriage is actually the picture of Christ and his church. And so we actually are not just connected to Christ, but we're connected to one another. The idea and the goal of the church is that we would be one. Jesus said it, in case you just want some proof. John chapter 17, verse 20. It says, I do not ask for these only, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, that they may all be one, just as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. So there's the oneness that we have with Christ. 1 Corinthians 6:17 says it very plainly. It says, but he who is joined to the Lord becomes one spirit with him. So there's the oneness that we have with Christ, but there's also within the Godhead, within the Trinity, there's a oneness that they have with one another. That's what makes our faith so beautiful, is Father, Son, and Spirit, co-eternal, co-existent, but somehow so blended together and harmonious that they are one. And then Jesus prays the prayer that we just read in John 17. I pray that they may be one as you and I are one. And so we're supposed to be one with our spouse. We're supposed to be one with Christ. But when we are one with Christ, we're supposed to be one with one another. All the things we just talked about with marriage, dying to yourself, giving another person preference over yourself, learning to live in harmony, are all things that are true of Christ and the church. We are called to forego our preferences, forego our desires, forego our wants for the sake of the common good. We're supposed to be one. And I just felt led. I was not planning on talking about this today, but I just felt led. I felt like the Lord wants to maybe even challenge us that we've got to give up ourselves in a way. We've got to give up our own thing for the sake of being one. Like, we want the benefits of being one, but we don't want the sacrifices of being one. Man, sometimes, I'm like this too, okay? I'm not exempt from this. Sometimes you come to church and you're like, well, I'm just trying to find my people. The people I click with the best, the people that I resonate the most with, the people who look like me, the people who act like me. And there's nothing wrong with getting along well with certain people. You're not required to get along with everybody and be best friends with everybody. But the church is not meant to cater to our preferences. Like, it's a good thing that there's people in this church that aren't like you. It's a good thing that there's people in this church who don't think like you, who don't act like you, who don't feel like. It's good to have some awkward conversations sometimes. It's like, I'm not feeling this, but like, I care about you. And I'm going to talk with you. And we're going to be one. Because Jesus died to make us one. Another definition of the word united, it means this: to become one entity, made into or caused to act as a single entity. I was doing research for this and I was like, what would be an example of that? And I started discovering information about alloys. Anybody a big fan of alloys in the room? Okay, I don't know much about this stuff. Some of you are like, yes, alloys, finally. I've been waiting for this. But an alloy, what it is, it's materials that are combined, and the combination results in function as one material. So steel is iron and carbon. And iron is great by itself, and carbon is great by itself. But when they come together, it gets stronger. When they blend together, it becomes one new thing that is even more powerful than each of those things by themselves. And what's interesting too is that in order for that to happen, like iron still needs to be iron. Carbon still needs to be carbon. It doesn't need to not be itself. It actually needs to be itself, but it needs to give itself to this combination so that those two things can form something different that's even better than each of them on their own. And I believe God, He's not calling us to be a homogeneous church, but a harmonious church. To blend together, to complement one another, to live in unity and harmony. And listen, sometimes as a pastor, it feels like it's so hard to say things and for people to know that they're like genuine. You're like, oh man, I hope people can see my heart in this. Like, I hope this doesn't come across like some pre-rehearsed speech. Guys, if we could really be one, I honestly believe we could change the world. We could at least start with changing the city. If we could be one, we would transform Detroit. I believe it with my whole heart. If we could be one, we could transform this city. If we could walk into a greater degree of unity, there is no stopping what God could do. And I was praying about this, and I felt led like on Tuesday to include this in the message, and I was like, this is not really what I was thinking about. And then this morning, I opened up my Bible reading app, and it's Psalm 133, and Psalm 133 is just 3 verses, and it says, how blessed is it when brothers dwell together in unity. All of this that we're talking about, dating and marriage and relationship, it's all a picture of Christ and the church. And I don't really even know, like, I should probably do a better job as a pastor. Like, I should have some, like, immediate next step. Like, okay, well, now let's do this. But I don't have one. My immediate next step is, let's commit to being the church. Let's forego our preferences. Let's die to ourselves. Let's give up the things that are, when we really think about it, it's not that important. I'm not talking about, let's change our theology and let's start to, those are important things, right? But when it comes to certain issues, it's not that important. What is important is our unity. Lord, what you prayed in John 17, I pray that would be true in Cross and Anchor Church. That we would be one as you are one. And that model that you show us between yourself and the Spirit and the Son, that we could somehow take that model and implement it into our life as a church. We aren't the same, but we're one. Lord, I just pray even now you would show us how we can let go of the things we need to let go of for the sake of unity. Maybe we could just spend a few moments before we close today and we could just kind of reflect on this and just ask the Holy Spirit to illuminate things in our life that might need to go so that we can walk as one. Let's just do that right now. We can sit together in silence and just ask God to do that in our hearts.